Welcome to another episode of Successfully Unsuccessful podcast. I'm your host, Josh Dietrich, and today, physically here in the house in Long Lake, Minnesota, visiting the studio of no other than the Danny Greene himself. How are you, brother?
Yes, sir. Doing great, man. Thanks for coming through.
Yeah, dude. So besides being a male and a husband of almost 1 year, I would go with entrepreneur, content creator, production guy, podcast host, app developer. What else? What else did I miss? Child of God.
Yeah, that for sure. Endurance athlete.
Ooh.
Musician. All sorts of
that.
all sorts of
Did we
different
talk about that before?
identities. I'm not sure if we have or not. Drums.
You're a drummer?
Yeah. Yep.
How do we miss that? I'm a drummer.
Let's go.
Do you play regularly?
Not really. I sold my set back when my parents sold their house, and I've banged around a little bit here and there at Guitar Center, and I'm always like beating and whatever at church or whatever. But no, I don't really play that much anymore. And then also I'll make music. I'll make some rap and everything. So
you actually put lyrics to it too?
Yep, exactly.
Ooh, you have to drop some. Maybe that'll be the intro for this.
Maybe
around.
We'll see. Yeah.
Well, dude, thanks for having me here in your studio. I had the privilege of being here, and vice versa happened half a year ago, maybe.
Yeah.
You came up to my studio and interviewed me. So, got to repay the favor and come down to the new part of the town.
Yeah.
You just moved here, and you're a city boy, though. Did you grow up in Minnesota?
Yeah, I grew up in Hopkins, and then went to school in Eau Claire. So I was over in Wisconsin for a couple of years after school as well, and then came back living in Uptown for a while. Lived in Northeast, and slowly have made my way out to the country here. So
they all eventually all kind of venture out.
It's nice. I never thought I'd be a country boy, but it's grown on me. The pace of life is nice and slow, and it's just peaceful.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I've been out in St. Michael, so I can relate a little bit. Growing up in a small town, Iowa, too, so totally feel at home.
Let's go.
So, diving right in, we met, man, like literally brand new, right in the thick of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like probably April 2020.
I was at that office, and we were watching Governor Walz, and we're shutting it down.
It's like, what just happened?
Right.
So we're renting this tiny little room, and you're there helping another guy we know, John, launch a podcast.
Yeah.
And you were a co-host, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so we got to talking, and I remember this sharp dude behind the camera had a few things to say, but off camera, I just saw ambition and the interest around entrepreneurship and figuring out what you're going to build and what you're going to grow. And so, fast forward, what are we now? 4 years later, you're in the thick of the grind, and you've done it. You've built it. You are what men that are in that season of life that are journeying and looking for to move into that next level on their own. You did it. So I want to just start there because what were you doing at that time besides the podcast in your life from a professional standpoint?
Yeah.
And what was the passion behind trying to figure out what it was you're going to do from an entrepreneurial standpoint?
Well, since high school, I knew I wanted to work for myself eventually. My dad worked for himself. He worked out of the office way before that was even a thing. And so I had that as an influence. And every job I had taken, for the most part, I took it through the lens of what can I learn from this position that is going to eventually help me run my own business. And so I came out of school with an ops management degree, doing like supply chain and inventory management, and I learned pretty quickly that was just a terrible fit. So I went and did my my little walkabout with my quarter life crisis, and when I came back from that, I got into sales and marketing. And I mean, sales is kind of where if you don't really know what to do, but you like business and you want to get involved, you go learn how to sell, And so I sold commercial cleaning services for 2.5 years, then transitioned to a company that was selling this food service. So I was selling food, and that's where I was when COVID hit, and then I got the chop in the office with John. And
You were there when you got waxed.
Yeah, I was sitting with John. I'm like, oh, that's my boss. I'm pretty sure it was 1 week after everything got shut down. So it was like, I mean, writing was on the wall. I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm about to get fired.
And that's what happened?
Yeah, he's like, hey, man, I'm sorry, but I got to let you go. And I was like, all good. I get it. Can I keep the laptop?
Yeah.
Because it was a Mac and I never had a Mac. He's like, yeah, I'll just remove it from your
final paycheck or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. He gave me like a whatever you call it, an extra like month of a severance.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll just reduce it from your severance. I'm like, bet, let's go. And so now I had a Mac, and I was like, if you're in the arts or if you're in a movie guy, you got to go Mac.
You're like, I have what I need, but if that was me, I'd give it back. I probably wouldn't have even taken it to begin with. I mean, Apple belongs on certain sides of the room. I don't know what it is. Why there's this, debate, but it's like once you go Mac, you can't go back.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It just works. Like everything just kind of works for me, and it's just simple. And I think Microsoft, there's a lot more customization, but for me, I just want something that works.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Okay. So now you get this call. And so in the thick of it, you're like, okay, well, what am I going to start? I think I literally, I didn't know that happened. So either I just wasn't aware, or it was just I got introduced to you. Like, I don't know if we'd met then.
There was a lot going on.
Yeah.
So like you probably had your own issues that you're working with.
Things and issues myself, right? But okay, so was it that moment you're like, I got to find something else? Was it panic, or where were you sitting in that? Because sometimes that's what we need to be the Kickstarter, right? To go. And I think that's on the other side of the coin. But the other option is things are great and you try to get something on the side going. But where were you in that season? Had you had other things going or anything on the side yet?
I had an LLC for a commercial cleaning company that I had just filed. I had no customers because I had seen... I worked for a cleaning company for 2.5 years. I saw how it all worked. I'm like, I could do this on the side, get a little side hustle going. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll do that and focus on that after a little bit of a break, understanding like what, just taking a breath. But so I started doing that, and real quick I learned like, hey, I don't have any desire to go clean buildings. And honestly, like most of the buildings were shut down and they cut all the cleaning services anyway, so there wasn't a huge demand. But I had a blast figuring out like the marketing side of things, building the website and shooting little videos to promo it, because the cleaning industry is such an old industry. It's like I'm going to differentiate by being better at marketing and just cutting through. And that was my plan. I was walking to the lake one day, and I felt this just like Holy Spirit moment where it's like, what are you doing with this cleaning company? Like, you have no desire. Like, just do marketing. Like, you like the marketing, and there's a whole industry, and there's plenty of work to be done in the marketing side of things, and just go do that for people. I was like, like Tony Robbins talks about how things can change in an instant. Like, there's a lot of buildup, but then once something changes, it's that's what I experienced. And so like from then on, I was like, I'm going full tilt marketing, full tilt photos, videos, whatever I can kind of hustle. Yeah. So I started cold calling local business owners. I had this drone, and like painters, general contractors, because home service industry was booming still. And so I was like, hey, for $100, I'll come shoot a before and after video or do some before and after photos for you on the house. When I was living in Uptown, there's houses everywhere. Right. And I sold like 5 out of the first 10 calls I made. I mean, granted, they were like $100, but like, I was like, I'm come from a sales background. Like, I'm lucky if I get like 2 people to answer the phone out of 10 calls. Right. And so I felt that as like divine encouragement. Like, hey, you're onto something here. Dude. And it's just kind of gone from there.
Wow. So we briefly touched on this on accident, but was that the uninformed optimism at that point? Meaning, hey, I don't know everything there is to know about what I'm getting into, but I picked up the phone and I had this sense of like, it works. A little bit of affirmation, a little bit of encouragement to say, let's go. But then then what happens, right? You run into the next layer of like, okay, this isn't sustainable. How is it scalable, right? You start having those questions. How did that evolve, and what happened next?
Yeah, no, definitely was that. And well, one, I come from like growing in the summer times and everything. I started my own businesses during the summer, whether it's painting houses or seal coating driveways or whatever. So I have this experience of kind of starting from scratch, having no backing, and just making cold calls. And now I have something that's actually pretty cool because people love drones. And I was like, well, listen, like, let me just go take. Everybody loves drones. It's an easy sell, and I'm doing it for $100. Right. So the uninformed optimism was that, hey, I'll just go call up a bunch of realtors because they're selling houses. They need drone photos. Boom, let's get it. And I learned real quick that a realtor just wants to hire the full package. They don't want to hire a drone photographer. They want to hire a photographer that takes indoor photos, outdoor, and the drone.
That's right.
And maybe even video if they want to do a video walkthrough. So I was like, oh, all right, well, I mean, how hard can it be to become a real estate photographer? You know what I mean? Like, it's literally like a standing structure, like a bad photo. Okay, try again. Right, it's like there's no pressure. And so I took some online courses, and I found this photographer on Instagram that I just loved his photos. He was taking premium photos of these California mansions. And shout out Tim. He actually has since passed away, but he was an incredible just encouragement. So I interviewed him on my podcast. I just like got him like, hey man, I just love following you. Can I whatever? Yeah. Gave him my little thing, and we connected. And then he kind of was like my distant mentor, and he gave me a couple course ideas, and then I just basically rechanneled that into knocking on doors, cold calling realtors, and then using my network too. Because I mean, who doesn't know some realtors in their network? Right. Everyone's got realtors. So
start there.
Yeah, exactly. So that just kind of slowly built, and man, I was so jacked every time somebody was like, "Hey, can you come shoot photos of my house?" I didn't care how much I was charging. I'm just like, this is awesome. Yeah. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
It wasn't sustainable to like build a family and stuff, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah. Well, that's the humility in the process of just getting something to work, right? Like I remember even for me, the number of things I started and tried, and the things that failed or I finished that I didn't restart, like selling these janky tungsten rings that I still have, literally $3 from China, and various other things I imported. But when something works, it's like, oh, all right, let's double down, right? But where was the point where you said, okay, this part of photography and drones and the package is cool, but I want to level up? What clicked there where you're like, okay, I want to maybe consider more media and marketing integrated with that? And then before you answer that, I guess we should back up. You mentioned podcast, and I'm guessing marketing related.
Yeah. Yep.
So walk us through, what's the name of the podcast, and when did it start, and why did it start?
The podcast is called The Top Brand Builders, and it started because, like you, I've had like a bunch of different little ideas that I wanted to pursue. And so this idea was it was a gelato company. It was called Joy Spreaders, and the idea was like to build a brand, and I wanted to understand how to build a brand. And I was like, I could just listen to some podcasts and that sort of thing, but I'm like, hey, there's a lot of business guys in Minneapolis that are successful, and I was at the cleaning company at the time, and I felt kind of just boxed in. I was like, I need to go meet some more people and build my network, and just come from it from a genuine curiosity, student perspective. And so I started cold emailing all sorts of like, Kieran Folliard of like Kieran's Pub or whatever. And he, the Mark Stutrud of Summit Brewing, the founder of that, and the president of the Minnesota Loons.
Really?
Yeah. And so like all these like pretty like successful guys. I just went on my LinkedIn. I'm like, who's interesting to me? And I just started cold emailing, and like a lot of people said yes. And that's how I got my job with the food sales, is I interviewed Tyler at Origin Meals, And then a little bit later, he's like, hey, we're looking for a sales guy. Do you have any interest? So
very cool.
So that was the podcast was my first kind of successful entrepreneurial venture that made no money, but it was a roundabout way to build my network. And
is it still on? Are you still doing it today?
yeah, I not like on a weekly or even monthly basis, but when I come across somebody that I really want to get to know and learn from, I'll use that as my platform.
It's a great idea. The inverse of listening to podcasts is, well, that requires me to just plug in and maybe zone in, zone out. But if, I invest, if I have the gear, that's a whole nother animal, right? Having the right gear to do it. But the best way to be learn in person, getting that one-on-one so you could really hone in on your questions, right?
Exactly.
So that's genius. So that's great. Now, thinking about what you learned from those guys probably started to stir in you some of the thoughts and confidence, I'm sure, right? To reach out and make that leap of faith. But question, if you hadn't got that call, the Dear Danny, this isn't working anymore, call, do you think you would have kickstarted all of this, or would it have been a year or two? It's a matter of when, not if, but still would have been longer?
Yeah, I don't want to even think about that because I felt already kind of stuck in that job and I didn't know where to go. So I felt like I had to have a swift boot to the rear end, and I needed like a swim, or whatever the saying is, like sink or swim
trial
moment.
by fire. Wow.
And to be completely transparent, there was financial aid from the government at that time for people that got laid off. So I wasn't so stressed. It was like, I wasn't so stressed about money. Mm-hmm. I didn't love taking the paycheck, but then I was also like, I hate, like, these are the cards that are being dealt to me. And, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. Like, things are kind of out of the ordinary. So I took that money and I invested in a lot of equipment. And so I was like, I'm just viewing Uncle Sam as my venture capitalist, and I'm going to give him a heck of a return, with the taxes I pay.
He's going to keep taking anyway. So.
Yeah.
Incredible. So I have to go there though, because I think that's the challenge so many of us just face, like feeling stuck. And I think it tests so much of us. And there's so many aspects of stuck, right? Like stuck in not having the passion to get up and go to work, to be motivated to do, everything we should be doing as if we're working for the Lord. Like, it's hard if we're not passionate about it. And then if it's like, okay, well, I'm good at my job, but I don't feel appreciated, or I don't feel like I'm making the impact I could be making, right? And you start processing this like, well, and then you start looking at your income and bouncing it off of that. And I talk to so many guys, and I think it's this cycle of trying to find our identity by in the means of what we do, as opposed to how we're wired and how God made us to thrive. And I think the struggle is in the Western world is we're so ready to go make money that we forget about our talents and our passions and the serving aspect of it. So what do you just going back now, and now you have the insight of a 32-year-old looking back at your 4-year-old, 5-year-old younger self, 6-year-old even. What could you hindsight 2020 to yourself? Because there are people that are stuck right now that are listening that are just in the same boat of, I'm doing my job, but I'm not fulfilled. I'm not making the money I want. I just don't get excited to be a part of this culture, right? Because side hustles and firing the man and all these things have become reality for so many people. So it's different now. So long-winded way of saying, looking back, what do you say to yourself now in 2024?
Well, trying a lot of different things is really important, and opening yourself up to experimenting and not being so quick to try to find your thing. Like, one way to view this is I was a couple of years ago, I was stuck and I was just like feeling stagnant with my life here in Minneapolis. And I was like, I should move somewhere and switch it up and do something new. And then I was just a fresh start. That's what I was telling myself. And then I was like, well, you know what? There's a big price to pay if you want to do that. And what if you just treated Minneapolis as if you just moved here? What would you do? And so that's the lens that I started looking through. And this was January, and feeling all ambitious and stuff. So I got on Eventbrite, and I was like, oh, that event looks cool. I'm going to sign up and I'm going to go. This event looks cool. Boom, I'm going to go. So like I started going to all these random events. Sometimes I would bring a friend with me. Sometimes I would go alone. And one event was this sauna and ice bath workout that it ended up being just my friend and I were the only two people that went. And we had a great time. And
even the host wasn't there?
The host was there. So it was like a private session. It was like a workout and then a fire ice session.
Got it.
But the point of that is that you can't don't despise the day of small beginnings, and everything starts from a seed. And so this talk about side hustles and all that is like, hey, put making money to the side for a second. Just figure out something that you really enjoy doing, that you love doing, that you do for free. Because I was doing all of this media production, all this stuff. As I look back, I was doing all this for free. I would take sermons from some of my favorite pastors, and I would cut them down from 45 minutes to like the most impactful 4 minutes and throw a little music behind it and then upload it. And why did I do that? I just was like, I kind of like it. I just like, let me just give somebody an ultra high concentrated dose of this like good sermon. And now that's what I do with like interviews. I'll we'll do a 45-minute interview with a video, and then I have to cut that video down to make it 2 minutes long. Right, it's like, it's exactly what I was doing, just a different context.
That's so cool.
So, I mean, don't put so much pressure on yourself that you have to figure out what you need to do right off the bat. Just take a little step. And I think there's two things with like decision making, is that a lot of times we're looking for that breakthrough decision, or that like, wow, like that thing that happened to me when I'm walking to the lake.
The aha moment.
But actually more often than not, it's about the tiny little decisions that compound over time. And you look back and you're like, oh, I've been tinkering with this little idea or hobby for like 5 hours a week for the last year. And all of a sudden I have something to show for it. And maybe there's something here that I could pursue even harder. So,
that's good, man.
Yeah.
That's good. How was your faith at that time? And really high level, did you grow up in the church? And where did this idea of God and making him Lord of your life really settle in?
I did grow up in the church. I never, I would say like I accepted Jesus when I was maybe like third or fourth grade. And then I didn't really like going to church though. And so as soon as I didn't have to, I stopped going. And I think like I always believed in God, but he was not the Lord of my life. And I didn't have like a relationship with Jesus. But after living in the world through college and a little bit after, I just felt like such an emptiness. And I felt like there had to be more. I mean, it's kind of a cliche story. It's like, but I started asking the bigger questions. Why am I here? What's the meaning? Is this like, what's my purpose? Like, just like the big questions of life. And so that's when I was like, I gotta just like get out and break my paradigm. And that's where I started saving up, and I took a trip down to Latin America. And it was like 4.5 months of just backpacking around, and
really
wanted to learn how to surf. So I went to the surf spot and like met all these awesome people that were just asking the same questions, and they had the courage also to like stop the rat race of life. And so I connected with these people that very like-minded. And anyway, so long story short is like when I came back, I mean, it was a journey to say I surrendered to Christ. But when I was 26, like September of 26, is when that happened. And it was like a build-up. That whole year when I was 26, I started going to this church, and the pastor was preaching very applicable messages that I was starting to integrate into my life. And there came a time where I was like, hey, if I'm going to call myself a Christian, I need to stop living this duplicit lifestyle, and I need to put my foot in the ground, and I'm going to do my best to really be authentic and like genuine. And so that's when I made the decision. And
it's cool, man. I think it's one of those things where the God word is pretty common, right? Like, thinking about our conversation today, and I've read recently too, even from what you shared with me, that a good chunk of the population believes there's a God, but beyond that, it's like, okay, it's not hard to look around and look at the intelligent, perfect design. And the downside of that is it means nothing if all we do is have that thought, like, okay, but then if it's a perfect design and we're here, how do we fit into that? And did you have, these little things that build up? Because I would agree with you, like even starting as a young kid, my faith, it had to grow over time, but it wasn't surrender. And it took something pretty catastrophic for me to get on my knees. But there was always seasons of, incredible faith. Do you recall at the time anything that just really shook you? Because I think the surrender word is key. I read a book, Absolute Surrender, even recently, about a year ago, and it was like, that's the difference. It's when we think we have control, it's simply saying, there's parts of my life, God, that, I'll let you have, but not all of it, and definitely not these things, right? And surrendering all of it, it's like, I don't need to control the outcomes, but I need to be obedient in what he's calling me to. So that distinction, I think, is ultimately putting your faith and trust in Jesus, because one, the difference he makes in how following him, we change in our thinking, in transformation of our mind, but also in our actions. So we're no longer a slave to this world, and we're a new creation. That piece is like, ooh, how present, how conscientious are we every day to practice that, to be renewed in his spirit? And so I think I'm just curious, when we talk about God and then church and then, prayer and praise and small groups and giving and serving, and then all of a sudden, I'm checking boxes, but boom. Do you recall at all something that happened in your life, or just where surrender was really real?
Well, I think before I answer that very specifically, when it comes to why Jesus is the way, is because I dabbled with my own like new age spiritualism and like positive thinking and all that good vibes. And on the surface, that's all great. Mm-hmm. I still kind of like that vocabulary and that whole lexicon, but when you really start to dig in, it doesn't have the foundation that holds up. And so with Christianity, it's not just like, hey, I'm going to choose to be I'm just going to choose team Christian. I could choose team Islam or team whatever, Hindu, Buddhist, Jewish, like whatever team. It's really not like that. There's one religion, which is Christianity, that holds up to the very core foundation, that the more you dig, the more like ask harder questions, and there is an answer. And there's an answer that actually bends your mind to like realize, oh, I didn't even think that could be, but that makes sense. And so for me, the surrender was, my pastor was preaching a series on sex, and it really convicted me. I was seeing a woman at the time that, we were sleeping together, and I had this history, and I was like, this is where it came to this like duplicit lifestyle that, hey, I'm saying I'm one thing, but I'm doing something else. And, we were at I went up to her. I felt so convicted one night, and I went up and I just, I told her, hey, I'm really thinking about surrendering my life to Christ. And she had some questions. And so we went out and got dinner, and we were just kind of talking through it. And then on the radio, I heard it was like a KQRS or like a 93X or some rock station. And on the radio, I just heard, Jesus wants to be your friend. Jesus wants to be your friend. Jesus wants to be your friend 3 times. And it was the woman's voice. I was like, did you just hear that? And she's like, no. And I was like, I'm always tuned into the music. I'm always listening. So that's a way that I can see how God would talk to me. And it was so crazy because, that is at the very pinnacle. I had so much tension in my heart. And because I knew if I make this decision, I'm the type that if I make a decision, I'm probably going to go that path. And
you're going to have to be all in. You're going to have to be.
Exactly. And there's going to be a lot of change coming. And I was definitely not perfect after that, but it set me on the path of sanctification.
Yeah,
and it was in my heart where I made that decision. So, we're always going to fall, and we're always going to just try to get up and do better and change. And that's been a journey, but for the most part, like that was the moment of surrender. And
that's good, because I grew up in the church, as I mentioned, and did my thing until 23, 4, met my now wife. I was in a band, in a rock band, and my number one was the band. The backup was Best Buy corporate, where I was at, making a nice living, but the band was what I wanted. But when I met my wife, something changed, and it was, I was all in for her. And because I was all in for her, the band got the back burner. And this thing that I was most passionate about, I got fired from. The only thing I've ever been fired from is a drummer of a band. But at that moment, I knew she had faith, and we grew up similarly, but we were having sex. And we eventually got engaged. But we started going to church together. And through that journey, we both were like, we're getting married. We're buying a house together. But we're living this duplicit life, and we know what the Bible says. And if we believe that, what are we doing? And so we made a covenant and honored that covenant for 10 months until we were married. And I think it's so powerful when the Lord convicts you and shows you the areas of your life where you need to evaluate seriously why and what it is you're doing, because the eternal ramifications, if not changing, are death, right? For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. And throwing even that, like you said, that's like one tiny little thing. But at that moment, it was like an all-in decision. And it was a tiny decision, but it was the biggest decision because you had to go all in. These little opportunities come down to a decision, right? You hit a fork in the road to help someone, to say that thing, that prompting. How have you learned to put your trust in Jesus by listening to the Holy Spirit when he prompts you? It gives you those nudges to take that step, whether you're with your wife or with a stranger, being who you are, hanging out, where you have to intentionally do something either different or take a step of faith and leap out.
I would start by saying I get it wrong and I don't take action way more than I get it right, or that I do follow and I obey that nudge. I say that humbly, and I want to grow in that. When I do sometimes take that action, it's always just it's never like banging me over the head. It's just a feeling, something in my spirit, something in my gut that just, you just follow. I don't know. It's not, there's no textbook answer. I was in the pool the other day, and hopped in the hot tub after at LA Fitness, and this guy was in there, and he just was like in pain, and he was like older, and there's just something in me that just asked, like, I just started a conversation with this guy. I just asked him a question. I asked him one tiny little question, and the guy just starts going. And like, to me, he was dying to talk to somebody. And then he finally had somebody to talk to, and he basically told me his life story. And then there was an opportunity. He was just in turmoil. And I was like, hey man, like, have you ever like thought about like checking out a church or finding some community like that? And then he's like, oh yeah, I actually just started going somewhere. And so it was just a cool way to, I don't know how that affected him or whatever, but it was just sometimes the tiniest little step forward is all you need.
Yeah, man.
I'd say being married has been an incredible lesson and refinement of understanding places that I didn't even know I was selfish in, that I was an issue. Like I was just like sin.
Right. We hate that word though, don't we? It's like such a bad word, but like yelling or negative tone, whatever those little tiny things are.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't mean to jump in, but like, as you're discovering in marriage,
Right.
the difficulty in the holding of the tongue, we got to go there.
Yeah.
What were you discovering in that refinement process where really, the sanctification process really needed to happen?
I mean, with my marriage, I'm absolutely so in love with my wife, and yet there's moments where it's just like we're not seeing eye to eye, and we're just disconnected. And as the man, I'm called to die to myself as Christ died for the church. I'm called to see my wife as holy and blameless. And that can be challenging, but it's something that's like, it's not about following your feelings. It's about following a conviction. And again, I get it wrong way more than I get it right.
Yeah.
But I think like really saying I'm sorry and not defending is probably the biggest thing that I've been working on, is just, empathy and understanding how my wife could see this from a different perspective, and how I was like, okay, like that isn't necessarily my perspective, but I can see how that could be your perspective, and I need to give grace. Like I need to have room and give grace and understand that and be okay with that. And so I mean, first year of marriage has been incredible. Lots of growing opportunities and challenges at times, but overall it's just been like the best thing ever.
That's good. Yeah, it's so incredible when we uncover our selfishness, and it's just so disguised, and it's been part of us for so long to take care of self, and then your spouse, it's like still a test, because frankly, let's just be honest, there's not a lot of sacrifice when it comes to some things, like it would be with a child, meaning you just don't have a chance, don't have a choice. You got to do what you have to do, right or wrong. And that should happen and always transfer over. But when you're dealing with the little innocent one, it's almost like, well, that we need to be hardcore in, but in our spouse, like, ooh, she's an adult. So we'll excuse that sharp tone or whatever. And I think you nailed it, because women, men, both of us, we want love and validation. And the love is expressed differently between us. And interestingly enough, like how we receive love is different, how we prefer to receive love. And it's just about hearing. And empathy is not a strong suit of mine. Like it's the worst to be able to like, and part of that is like, I ask a lot of questions, and my questions sometimes with the tone or with the wrong angle sound like to her that there's going to be a left hook coming. You know what I mean? And so having to be able to step back and hear your own voice and check your heart. But then when they point it out to you, and then the natural defense mechanism kicks in, then it just compounds in a vicious cycle. So being able to hear what they say, affirm what they say, and somehow relate, even when you don't agree, right, is a true testament of dying to self.
Yeah.
So, but then it gets harder, and then there's 5 of them in your house, and they all want attention, and they all need something in one. You're like, oh gosh, like then it's a real test of anxiety, anger, and what comes out. I'm like, oh my gosh, underneath all of this is selfishness. Stop bugging me, kids.
Yeah, right.
You know?
And I'll say what's been helpful is we've developed a nice relationship with a couple from our church that we've gone to them when when it's challenges we're working through, and we'll go over to their house even and just talk through it. And that's so helpful that this couple that we both really respect and we completely open ourselves up, that they can speak into our lives and like correct me. And that's been very helpful. I've been seeing this counselor who's been very helpful in just kind of helping me process and giving me tools to understand emotional intelligence and all that, and then friends and that have been married a long time that can speak into your life, like John. He's been it's tough to do this alone, and I think you could do it alone. I just don't know how well you're going to do it.
No, we're made for community, and to sharpen one another. As iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another, and community is where we learn and grow. And what you described right there is so powerful, dude. Like, counseling isn't for broken people. I always describe it as a way to take a good marriage and work it into a great marriage. And then my personal counselor, it's like, hey, what are we going to talk about today? Is kind of the general first question. And like, I really don't, and I might even came into that session not really thinking anything was wrong. But then the professional prompter that he is, really what AI is designed to do is to prompt something to get what you need out of it. And a counselor's trained to do that based on the circumstances and what they know about you. And so, boom, 50 minutes goes by. All of a sudden, I've got everything out there that I didn't even know I needed to get out there. So how powerful. But then the couple, being able to have mentors like that, we learned something so key. We actually hired a marriage coach, Mark and Jill Savage. Pretty interesting, crazy story, but he was in ministry, ended up having an affair, and they worked through things. They came back together and, been in ministry together now for a long time, but in marriage. And that dynamic they have, marriage coaching. So we sat on one 90-minute call, and we were just going through in-law situations. And it was very simple. Have you seen this diagram? It's right down the middle. It separates 2 lines, the flesh and the spirit. Okay? And the challenge is, well, what's going on with the in-law? Well, the flesh would say, I think that when she comes here, or I forget which one starts. Feeling impacts the way we think. Think and then feel, and then we validate it through our thinking. But we often feel our emotions. But we go through this list of the flesh, and we go, I think that she wants to stir the pot, and I feel uncomfortable when this dynamic happens. Therefore, I believe she shouldn't be welcome here, or shouldn't be coming over here as often as she would. So think, feel, believe, and then do. Because do then impacts the action. And so it all starts back up here in this thinking and feeling. But if you look in the spirit, back to pointing to the scripture, what does the Lord say? The Lord says she's a child of God too, and she's fearfully and wonderfully made. And that changes the way we think about her, should change the way we feel about her. It also changes what we believe about her and what we do to show her love. And I was like, what? In a quick little session, just because of this one little dynamic we had. And it was game changing. And now I use that a lot.
That's great.
And those tools, right?
It's
Tools
a
in the tool belt.
Yeah.
We need them. Another one that I just love, I don't know if you feel like this too, but how many times is there just baggage from them or you that bleeds into reality that's not reality, right? So the thing that I've had to learn to do was say it out loud to your wife as a way of expressing the story I'm telling myself is that you think, right? And so it's like, oh, objectively, let's look at this. Is that true, right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
what have you learned?
The stories we tell ourselves are just, it's so often they're not right. Whether it's about a situation, it's about who we are as people, what the other person was trying to do. It's like, so that verbiage exactly is like, the story I'm telling myself is this. And we've both really worked through fights without the fireworks and drama that could have happened, because we're just sharing what our internal belief is. And then the other person can meet us where we're at and either say, oh, that's not accurate, or that's kind of accurate, but this is off, and that's why that matters, and whatever it is. So
it's crazy what we think, though, sometimes when we let our feelings and emotions, but then also what we believe and think influence. And we can still have beliefs and thoughts and feelings, but they don't have to match our spouses in many times. But let's not cross the line with how we treat each other because of our differences in views and thoughts and thinking and feelings. So
yeah,
it's incredible. How do you incorporate into your life managing what you're managing now? What systems are you working through to stay grounded, to stay focused, to prioritize the right things? Because I think so many times, especially those that are visionary doers, can get caught doing a lot of things that are outside of the sweet spot. And even in our marriage, all of a sudden, poof, I'm going to go all in on this to make sure my wife knows she feels loved. And then I forgot all about it. How do you keep yourself grounded? What routines do you have? Share with us.
Yeah. I'll just go through kind of a normal day is, I just got a new bed, a sleep number. And
What's your number?
45.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is that good, or is that high or low? Middle?
Right about middle. But that's been huge, just finally getting some good sleep, because I've been having back pain and just like weird.
You must be 30 now.
Yeah, it's crazy. But having good sleep is really key. But usually I get into the Word for like 15, 20 minutes right away in the morning, make my coffee, do that, and then I need to go for a run. If there's days I don't go for a run, but I always kind of regret not doing it. And to me, it's sharpening the axe. It's like, do I really want to take this extra 35 minutes to go for a run? And sometimes I'll rationalize it and be like, I got so much to do today. I just got to go into the office. But the fact is I'm never as sharp. I'm not productive. If I just taken that time, then things become easier. It gets me into a mindset of possibility and motivation. And I always listen to like something good. Like when it comes to motivation, it's people say it's like showering. Like it's not gonna last. That's why you have to do it every day.
Yeah.
And I think some motivation is like you can get too sucked into it, like junk food, that you're eating it all the time. But when you listen to it when you're working out, I'm really been on like a Jim Rohn kick lately, and it's just food for your mind, and it just gets you into a place that it's like having a mentor just whisper into your ear for 35 minutes. And so that's that. And then so always exercising. And then I'm trying to just get better at doing less but better. It's kind of the thing that I'm been working through. Is there's always more to be done, but what's like the one thing that I could really do well today? And whether that's this podcast today or an edit yesterday or whatever it is, like just trying to stay simple with that. And then any other systems at Microsoft To Do, that app is the app that I just use for everything. I've tried so many different like task management, whether it's Asana or Notion or Monday, like all these different ones. They're so powerful, but at the end of the day, I just need something super simple, intuitive, and quickly that works. So I just do it all in To Do and set due dates, and that's kind of The skinny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. You know, I've got to this place where I want to literally, I just, the stewardship word has been just so overwhelming for me this last year and a half. And, you know, our time, our money, our resources, attention, and consider, right, where we spend our money. We look at the bank account, you look at the bill, and you could see where you spend your money. Pretty easy. But where you spend your time is not so easy to analyze and audit. And so I have this massive desire where I keep talking about the ecosystem, but so many things are integrated where so many things are coming at us and so many things we want to do, have to do, should do, could do, that eat our time. And so like a task management tool has to sync to my calendar, and then I have to live in my calendar. So that's been very helpful. And setting routines as recurring tasks, you know, builds that.
To speak into that, I got this app for the same thing. I'm like, where is my time going? I'm not budgeting. And what's it called? It's called A Tracker. And it's the best time tracking app because it just works. So you just click it. I'm doing this task, and getting honest about how long something takes, and then reflecting. And as I was mentioning before, I saw how much time I was spending in the car every day. I'm like, no wonder it feels like I'm rushing through the day. I'm like hurried because I'm spending 45 minutes commuting, like doing this like various tasks every day. I was like, I got to cut that down. I got to change the lifestyle, and then getting real about how long an edit takes, or all this stuff. Understanding your time and budgeting your time is, man, it's like the first step is actually acknowledging where you're at.
Yeah, for sure. And like everything, right? Just taking an objective audit.
Yeah. It's never as pretty as you think. You're always looking at something idealistically. And you're like, oh yeah, I could do that in an hour. No, it's probably going to take 2.5, 3.
My wife always doubles it. You know, I'm going to be home at this time. She adds an hour. It's like, okay. But that being said, like the Lord started speaking to me like discipline was what I needed to really work on, because this Bema podcast we were talking about, our God is a God who knows when to stop creating, meaning after day 6, then day 7, he knew when enough was enough. And also on the flip side, I know it was enough when to stop. So stop creating, but then stop doing the things that you shouldn't do. It's this interesting dynamic, or do the things you need to start doing. And discipline was the word, because I realized time, you know, and how do you teach these things, right? It's just like, well, if you're in sports, you develop habits. They're showing up at the gym. Well, I wasn't doing that. So these are just little things that even in our 30s and 40s, learning how to do is incredible. But dude, it's been awesome to hear your journey, your story, and just some of the weeds of life that kind of grow. And when we look back, facing our whole life and assuming we arrive at the end, the pearly gates, and Jesus hasn't returned yet, how would you define success in that moment? You get to the end, and you know, you're facing Jesus, and you hope he says what? Well done, good and faithful servant. But what does that mean to you now, working it backwards and then projecting it forwards?
I think since getting married, that has changed quite a bit. And I think success is really, like, internally, it's starting small. When I was younger, I had more of a grandiose idea of what success is. I think success would be having grandchildren that love you, family around, and rich community. Not just family, but like friends, deep friendships. And then when it comes to like influencing or impacting the world, my mindset might adapt and change on that. But that's almost an overflow from the love and the energy that you put into your core.
Yeah, that's so good.
That's kind of probably what I would say.
I use the core word too, and you know, the impact we make comes from how we love others and treat others, and the things we say and do when we're acting under control and we're acting under the influence of the Holy Spirit, right? And
well, relationships are really the only eternal thing here. You know, the only thing that we get to bring to heaven is relationships.
That's good. That's good.
I didn't make it up, but I heard that. And I'm like,
no, it's good. I got to look that up more. Yeah. Well, dude, Danny, thanks for having me here. Great spot, great setup. And I love to continue on the conversation, but
Awesome.
We ran out of our first hour.
Yeah, man, it went quick. Awesome questions, and thanks for coming in and doing this, and it was a pleasure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of Successfully Unsuccessful. We'll check you next time.